Hello, I'm Walter Richards from DaGameTrain, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Strategy Marathon. We once again continue our glorious adventure, if you can call it like that, with War of the Ring. Let's do a little recap before we continue. Last time, we kinda did a little face-off with Sauron's forces, his most personal army, if you will, and even his Balrog, apparently. I'm not sure how exactly he went around to summoning it in the middle of the path from the Black Gate, or wherever we were fighting at. But it doesn't matter, because despite his greatest efforts, he still got his ass handed to him. Not that it was too easy, mind you, but it was quite a spectacle nonetheless. Now we're going to take the helm with the evil campaign, to see the story from a different perspective, and I do have to say, this is probably one of the first instances where you get to play as the actual evil of the game's universe, rather than just something that some people consider evil. Because, for instance, Earth 2150 doesn't have anything evil in it. All of the factions there are equally bad or good in terms of their alignment, which leaves a lot of room for alliances and such. Here, it's pretty damn obvious. Good guys are the humans, elves and dwarves, whereas the bad guys are orcs, goblins and trolls, and the occasional ghost here and there. I don't know, I kinda like that, being able to distinct who is who. Of course, this isn't the first time this happens. I think Dungeon Keeper came out a bit earlier than this, so you can't really say that this is a pioneer in this kind of a thing, but it's definitely one of the few that kinda started this notion. But enough rambling about useless crap. Let's get started with our very first mission, the Mouths of Entwash.
The Dark Lord's forces are pressing into Rohan. With their supplies steadily dwindling, Grishnach is ordered to send more slaves to work their camps. Between these slaves and the mighty army lies the maze-like Wetwang, which is heavily guarded by enemy outposts. To ensure the safe passage of the slaves through the marshes, Grishnach assigns a troop of soldiers as escort.
That narrator, I still don't know what his name is, but he sounds pretty damn good. He's got that good evil voice. Wonder what his name is.
Time to prove your worth, worms! The last group of swine we sent to attack Rohan are a miserable lot. They grew tired of tasteless meat and ate their goblin workers. Now, we've got to send some of these filthy goblin slaves to replace them. Make sure they get there alive.
Me? Oh, I'll watch them. I will see to them.
And if we get hungry, we'll just... I said alive! And keep your wretched eyes open! Train more warriors if you can't handle it yourselves! Then make your way through the swamps! I'm leaving your worthless hides to handle this! I've got more important things to do than protect some miserable slaves! Now get moving!
Alright, that was our very first instance of Grishnach. Don't worry, it won't be the last. So here we go. We start off with our starter package of 1 slave master, 5 workers, and 3 orc slashers, the weaker equivalents of a Gondor swordsman. Now, of course, the game would like to spoil things before I even get to them, so let's not waste any time. The thing that makes playing with the evil team a bit more difficult is that you cannot build on this green land. This is considered green land, by the way, or just normal land if you prefer. And if you try to build something on it as the evil guy, you will notice that you only get this red crap, indicating that there's an obstacle, even though the plot is pretty flat. You need to select your slave master first, and then build a war post. Choose wisely where you put this thing.
Come on.
This should be good.
An objective has been completed.
While it does cover a pretty wide area, they do tend to be rather expensive in the long run.
Move out.
But there you have it. Now we have plot, which can be used to build stuff on it. Now keep in mind that you do not have to necessarily keep the buildings on the plot, on this corrupted land, to make sure that they, well, remain there. No. The buildings will not start spontaneously combusting or anything like that if they are suddenly on regular land. So if you lose a few war posts, you're not exactly in trouble. However, it is recommended to make sure that they stay intact, because without this corrupted land, you have nowhere to build. At the moment, you can only build as much as this plot allows us to, which is kinda shitty when you think about it, but then again, I think it's good enough. Let's see, looks like I'm missing some population. Another thing that the evil team has a bit different is how population is handled. For the good guys, it was pretty simple. Build some more tents, which were called, well, camps for some reason. Just build some more camps and there you go. And you can upgrade them a little bit later on. Here things are a bit more straightforward and a bit more helpful in a way.
Construction is complete.
Population is handled with a unit called the Slave Master, who just happened to come out of that hole. The Slave Master gives a boost of population by 12 points per Slave Master. So you'll eventually end up with quite a bunch of these bastards, without really knowing what to do with them. And you can't really afford to have a lot of these slave masters running amok, right in the middle of your base, or even anywhere around the map, because if they start dying, you kind of start losing your population limits. And that would be just disappointing. Luckily, this is where they can come in very handy. It just so happens that the slave masters are considered a warrior rather than a hero or a worker of some sort. And if you remember, towers have this neat little figgy chair where if you put a regular soldier type into them, they will speed up. You can have up to 4 of those types inside each tower, which means that eventually your collection of slave masters can be put to good use. You can put them inside towers to increase their effectiveness. I think that's a very good thing. Because, well, let's be honest, It's the only time you'll actually be interested in using towers properly. But besides having a bunch of detector units in it, maybe. There's also a few other things that the tower can have for the evil team, but we do not yet have access to that. So we'll just have to wait on that. The objective suggests that you have to build a little base which contains a goblin hovel, a slaughterhouse, which is the equivalent of the mill, the smelter. Yeah, it's a smelter. The smelter, which is the equivalent of a foundry, if that's what it's called. The orc mound, which is the equivalent of a barracks. And the building that makes playing as the evil guys even more interesting. The Fortress of Mordor. The Fortress of Mordor counts as the leveling structure separated from what the stronghold is normally like. If you remember, the stronghold for the good guys is originally used as the main structure for the base. You can build workers, you can recruit heroes from it. Here things are a bit different. You recruit workers from the Goblin Hovel. Now the Goblin Hovel contains only workers, slave masters and a Goblin Spearman, which is a very lackluster warrior. He's only really good in large forces, but I don't think we'll ever get to show him off because he is particularly weak. I could use more archers.
Time for blood.
The leveling and the summoning happens in the Fortress of Mordor. Some would say that this is actually a better thing, because that way, if your goblin hovel would be destroyed in the middle of a skirmish, you would still retain all of your building rights, if that's the right word. You would still be able to build all the advanced stuff. Even if you couldn't build any more workers or slave masters for that matter. I personally think that is kind of unnecessary. It would have been nice if you could combine the two buildings into some kind of a stronghold equivalent for the evil guys. But then again, I don't mind this difference at all. It's okay. My only complaint is that the Fortress of Mordor is a particularly large building. It takes up a lot of space. But that matters little at the moment, for we have the Wet Wang Maze to get through. These swampy marshes happen to be rather treacherous at the moment, as they contain a lot of rangers, a lot of swordsmen, and a few wild Bjornings running amok. We have to secure a route through this place for the workers to get through. If you take a look at the minimap, you will see that there is a ring on the other end of this map. We have to get 5 workers there, alive. Now if we had savage influence, we could just charge through without having to worry about all of this opposition. Unfortunately, we just don't quite have it. So we can't make use of it. With that said, we also do not have a lot of resources to make use of, so we have to make our purchases count. This is where you get to learn more about the characteristics of the most common evil forces that you'll be controlling within this campaign. The main thing to know about them is quantity over quality. These guys are not particularly strong. You'll find that their good guy equivalents are much more powerful than these guys are on their base stats.
What is it?
In fact, I do remember doing a little test with my friend Chiba some time ago, where we put various units against each other, one-on-one. And the Orc Slasher turned out to be just barely weaker than the Gondor Swordsman. He barely manages to kill the guy, you know? Like, he doesn't manage to finish off the Gondor Swordsman, but he does a lot of damage to him. Puts the health bar to red. So basically you need about 2 Orc Slashers to get rid of one Gondor Swordsman. Of course, you will never really send a swordsman all by himself whenever you have access to archers, because they can back him up. I think archers here are kind of the equivalent of the dwarf axe throwers. They're just as squishy actually, maybe a bit weaker, but I don't know.
Yes, run dry, as you command.
And that sounded like a cue that we no longer have access to fresh resources, and that it's time to make our moves count. Now whenever we get attacked by rangers, that's not a big deal. We can take them out. They're just as powerful as our regular archers, which kinda does tell a lot, doesn't it? Pathetic bastards. We destroyed them rather effortlessly. I think another skirmish will allow us to unlock some certain fate powers which you could make use of. This mission, although it is the first one and not particularly difficult, it can be quite annoying. Mostly because this is indeed a sort of a maze. It's not a very bad maze. You're not gonna get lost here for ages. However, you will find that it's a little difficult to navigate. We better kill them. Taking the wrong turn and ending up at a dead end is very easy here. Damn, now I got 3 of the ghosts. Last time I only had 1 ghost Gondorian. I'm not sure why it happens. But yeah, taking the wrong turn is pretty simple to do in this map. And it's a bit of a waste of time. But now we have access to some of the more advanced fate powers. Things are a bit different here as well. You may recall that the good guys had such fate powers as blind, brambles, the heroic legacy, what's that other thing, some kind of wind bullshit that gave temporary knockback abilities, and of course summon the Ent. Here we have Summon Bog, Murder of Crows, Wild Surge, the Obelisk, and of course Summon Balrog. First, let's do this. The Wild Surge is your emergency healing kit. If you have some fate points available and you need something healed really bad, it's your go-to choice. That, or you can just, I don't know, depending on the situation, wait it out. However, sometimes you just can't wait for someone to heal up, because he's probably getting hit and needs that healing real fast right now. And that's where Wild Surge comes in handy. It is a rather expensive way of healing though, keep that in mind. Unless you're constantly fighting and collecting fate points, you'll find this method of healing to be a little bit too expensive for your everyday needs. The summon bog power allows you to put a bog somewhere where it's most convenient for you and slow down anything that goes through it tremendously. It's a great choke point control tool, but that's about it. It doesn't hurt anyone like the brambles. And again, now that I think about it, I don't think brambles ever actually slowed anyone down. They just herded like a bitch.
Yes, my lord.
I don't quite remember.
As fast as I can.
Why, thank you, game, for telling us how to access the powers of fate.
Target practice.
Provided you never really understood how it works, you just click on the Palantir button, which is this red orb in the middle. For the good guys, it's the blue one. Either way, it's in the same spot. Murder of crows and the obelisk happen to be a bit weird, actually. Whereas the good guys had the brambles, the wind, I don't quite remember its name at the moment, and fuck. Well, that's about it actually. Heroic Legacy was the other thing. The evil guys have access to two powers which are specifically designated to be defensive. Murder of crows allows you to protect a specific unit or maybe a couple of units, I'm not exactly sure how it works since I never use it, from ranged attacks. Think of it as Legolas's Guardian Wind or whatever it's called. That's a hurricane power up which makes him invulnerable to all ranged attacks. A neat little feature. Here, on the other hand, it is accessed by fate, and while it sounds useful in theory, most of the time I don't think you'll find it necessary. In fact, most of the time I noticed while playing as the evil guys that you'll be the one causing a lot of necessity for such powers, rather than somebody else. So you never really have to worry about ranged attacks becoming an issue. Then again, it depends with what you're playing. If you're playing with bots, well, you probably won't have to worry about it too much. But if you're playing against a real opponent, well, you might just have to consider its usage. The obelisk, on the other hand, that's more universal, but it costs more. It spawns a giant obelisk at your preferred location, and everyone around it will, I wanna say, will have total immunity, but the last time I tried, it wasn't exactly total immunity, it was more like they soaked up a lot of damage. I'm not quite certain, but what I do know is that it helps a lot in damage control. While that thing is in the field, it will try to soak up as much damage as it can from your forces which are being afflicted by, well, damage. So, for instance, if you have a huge army trying to destroy your forces, just plop down the obelisk and you will have a fighting chance. Beware though, it may not help out as much as you think it will, as the obelisk tends to be a very temporary measure. In fact, it's as temporary as it can get. The bloody thing only has 5000 HP, so once that is gone through, that's it. Put this damn tower here, I wonder. Well, the let's get these guys selected. You move.
What is it?
Advance. We should be done with this mission real soon. What makes this mission a bit more annoying is that some spots here, well, you have to cross the river, but you never really see a place where you can actually do the crossing in. Like, there's no clear indication where you can cross the river. You just have to try your luck. Like here. It all looks the same. How would you know if you can cross here or not? I don't know.
An objective has been completed.
We made it! I say we run for it before we end up in someone's belly.
I see new slaves have arrived. Just in time for dinner.
Safely across the ambush-laden swamplands, the goblin workers made their way to the support camps of the forces attacking Rohan, where they provided much-needed supplies to the front lines. With the fall of the enemy troops patrolling the swamps, the path was safe for transporting more reinforcements and provisions to aid the Dark Lord's army.
Seriously, that voice of his is just awesome. Don't mind the name of the profile. Had some issues.